one does in life is also really important, because when you got so many people in the IT room, I don't know how you can even breathe in there, or trying to fix up whatever problem it is. Sometimes, problems just can't be fixed up, so you just leave it. And is it not working? That's good. Oh, what a shame. Okay, so the talk today is... You don't need to go now, we've fixed up the internet. Okay. Even when things go wrong, you still smile. So, the talk I was going to give today, because what I was talking about just earlier, just off the cuff, to talk about out-of-body experiences. Somebody just mentioned that beforehand. It's been a long time since I talked about out-of-body experiences. Exactly what are they? And are they really useful? Are they helpful? And what do they tell us about the meaning of life and the nature of life? And of course, one thing about being a monk, that because we talked about meditation and deep meditation, we've got all of the tradition of Buddhism and all this weird stuff which happens, and a lot of it is real stuff, that when these things actually happen to other people, they often come and ask me. So you've not only got your own experiences, but you also accumulate the stories of so many other people and what happens to them when they have out-of-body experiences. And one of the ones which I used to tell very often at funeral services, because this was giving people a pretty accurate idea what happens to you when you die. And it's important for you to know that, so you're not scared of death. And that was a story of one of the the government MPs, a long time ago. And now what was his name again? But anyway, he was in Vietnam during the Vietnam War, Australian soldier, and he was helping one of his colleagues who was injured, and as he went to help his colleague, he stepped on a landmine and blew off his legs. And because he blew off his legs, he described what happened next. I remember reading the article which he wrote about this experience. Obviously immense pain, but the next thing he noticed, it was so intense pain, the next thing he noticed, in his words, which I can always remember, was floating above the paddy fields of Vietnam without a care in the world. One of the most happy, peaceful, blissful experiences of his life. And of course this was written by a politician who was always trustworthy. Come on. When they talk about worldly things, maybe you can doubt what they're actually saying, but this was actually real, honestly describing what he felt. One of the most blissful, peaceful experiences of his life. But then he recalled that his wife, back here in Perth, had just given birth to his first child, a son. And the thought came up, it is not a kind thing just to die. For his wife, who had just given birth, he had to come back for her. So next thing he noticed was being pulled back into his body, and when he was in his body, it was enormous pain again, so much that he fainted. And when he came to again, he was in the hospital getting treated, starting the long journey to being recovery. He had to be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life, and apparently that because of him, in the federal parliament in Canberra, they did make sure there was adequate wheelchair access for everybody. But anyway, the important part of that story was just what happened when he left his body, the first initial shock of the explosion which blew his legs off. so peaceful, so blissful, so joyful. And that is something which is important for everybody to know, that when dying is very unpleasant sometimes, not always, but when you get past that point of death, when you leave your body, when you have that out-of-the-body experience, it's usually very, very pleasant indeed. So, and that's not just one person's experience, that's accumulated, an example of many people's experience. Very, very pleasurable. And we know that from our meditation experiences, because actually you're doing something similar when you meditate deeply. When you meditate deeply, your 5 senses disappear. Seeing, smelling, taste and touch vanish. And that's what happens when you leave your body. Your 5 senses go. I say, well, is there anything left? My goodness, there is. There's this mind sense left. And that mind sense, freed from the other 5 senses, is always very delightful, really blissed out. Of course, I can't say, because one of my Vinaya rules, I can't say personal experiences, but I know of this one monk who's actually a lay person, and he had, a nice girlfriend, he was sexually active, and he went on his first meditation retreat as a lay person, and went into one of these deep meditation, really blissed out. The bliss better than sexual orgasm. I can't tell you who that monk was. Otherwise I get into an offence. I think many of you can guess who it is. But anyway, that was one of the reasons this person became a monk. This was weird. When you leave your 5 senses, you leave your body, literally, and you go into the realm of the mind, it's incredibly pleasant. But not just pleasant, it's also you get a lot of wonderful understandings. There's lots of benefits being able to leave your body. I remember one of these gentlemen I used to talk to when I used to go to visit Carnet Prison Farm. It's amazing when you get out there into the world and people trust you. They give you all these really interesting details about their life. You'd love to actually write a book about this, the weird experiences which you gather over the many years. But this gentleman, he was Yugoslavian. This was before the breakup of Yugoslavia. And he told me that one of his earliest memories was when he was a young child. He was really sick. He was having an operation under full anesthetic. And so, he was unconscious, but then kind of waking up and not actually in his body. The operation wasn't over yet. He was actually above his body. And he could actually look at what the doctors were doing, the surgeons were doing. And even though he was only a young kid, maybe 5 or 6 years of age, he knew, this is how he said it, he knew the doctors were looking at the wrong place of his body. He was dying, because they weren't addressing the problem. And all he did was just think. In Buddhism meditation we call it determination. You determine, may the doctors not look over there, but look over here. And as soon as he made that determination, they call it adhitthana or adhisthana in Sanskrit. As soon as he did that, he was only a kid, he wasn't a Buddhist. And as soon as he did that, one of the doctors looked. And they saw the problem. Said, oh, here it is, this is the problem. And they cured him. And he went back into his body and he survived. And he said from that day on, whenever he wanted to leave his body, he could. He could just float out any old time. So that's when he told me that being in Carnet Prison Farm was not a problem for him at all. If he wanted to watch a football match, he didn't need to buy a ticket. He just float out of his body and go to Subiaco Oval or wherever it was, no matter how far away, and find out what the score was. If he wanted to go and see a movie, no one could stop him. In sort of the way the Buddha described it, we call this the mind-made body, manomaya kaya, which is sometimes people can make these mind-made bodies, just while they're still alive, and have these out-of-the-body experiences. And if you do have them, for many people, they're weird because they don't know at all what's going on. Are they going crazy? Is this real or what is it? That's one of the reasons why I say these are real for most time. Most time you go and check it out. There's one of our members years ago, he was Burmese, and he because of his upbringing, he had very powerful sort of focus in his mind, good meditation, and he could get into these out-of-body experiences whenever he wanted to. And he had an air conditioning business, and so his air conditioning business took him up to Darwin. He had a contract up there working in Darwin many years ago. He had an English wife, and the English wife wasn't Buddhist at all, but they fell in love and had a wonderful relationship together. And one day, actually when he went up to Darwin, he was always really jealous of his wife. He loved her so much, and one day, many days apparently, he decided to go and check up on her, make sure she was being faithful. He was away for many days. But she told me that every time he came to visit, she knew he was coming in. She could feel him there. Because they were married together, lived together for such a long time. And he would say, Keith, I'm being faithful, you don't need to come. Go back to Darwin. And this was in Cannington. I think Dennis knows who I'm talking about. Really good fun, this man. But anyway, these are real out-of-the-body experiences. So, are they useful? One of the reasons why I was talking about this, because we were talking about this doctor who's going to be coming to give a talk during the rains, Dr. Brian Walker, our local GP, but he was also the GP in Hong Kong of this lady Anita Murajani, and she's go on the internet, you can see some talks by her and books, very good best-selling books. She's a good talker, but her experience while she was in Hong Kong, she was Indian but working in Hong Kong, and Brian Walker was her GP, but she had so many cancers inside of her, and all of those cancers which she had were literally killing her. She had many operations, and this operation was, they think last chance for her. They thought she was going to go, and she did die on the operating table. And when she died on the operating table, she obviously came back again, and then she told the story, what it was like. First of all, being able to see and hear everything which was being said. The doctors confirmed it. How the heck do you know that? You were unconscious at the time. And not only being able to see and hear everything, but then floating out of her body and to this big, beautiful light. And those of you who heard me teach the deep meditation on retreats, we call those nimittas in meditation. Beautiful lights. What it is a manifestation of your mind. That's one thing which I disagreed with her on. Not sort of God, it may feel like that, but it's actually your own mind. And when it's freed from the five senses, it's very powerful and extremely blissful. Like being in the middle of pure love or pure bliss. Those meditation experiences which I said earlier, they're such powerful happiness and joys. It literally is blissing out very deeply. And then when she came out afterwards, she didn't know how long she was in there, she came with what we call in Buddhism insight, understanding. But her main concern at the time obviously was her health, her sicknesses, her cancers. And when she came out and became conscious again, to the surprise of the doctors, they thought she would have died. And then the first thing she said to the doctor was, I'm cured. And the doctors thought she was just hallucinating. Because, she had big tumours inside of her. What do you mean you're cured? And that's when afterwards she mentioned, because I've understood the cause of my cancers. And the cause of the cancers was the emotional stress of trying to live up to other people's expectations all the time. Like you, your partner in life, your children's expectation of you as a mother, as a father, as a grandparent, your parents' expectations of you. your boss's expectations of you, and more powerfully your own expectations of you. What do you think you should be doing? Do you really feel that inner stress inside, trying to live up to some standard, and you don't know where those standards are from? And when she saw that she was a very successful woman, when she saw that that was what was causing the stress, which manifested in the tumours in her body, she understood that was the reason why she had the cancer. Now she saw that and could understand the main cause of the cancers. Then she said, I'm not going to try and live up to other people's expectations anymore. I'm going to relax and just be me. And you know that as soon as you, if any of you ever do that, you find out the you end up being is much, much, much better than the you that you try to be. All of that force, you're not working well enough, you're not good enough, you're not trying hard enough, you're not successful enough, you could do more, you could do better. That is a terrible burden on your body, which means that you work too hard. Even if you don't work much at all, you're still just trying too hard. You still have that stress inside of your body and mind. And she said that was what's causing my cancer. She saw that as the insight which came out once she came out of that deep state, out of the body. So sometimes some of those insights which we get when our mind is clear, like I said last week in the sutta class, that's when the 5 hindrances, and this is how we say it in Buddhism, things like wanting, not wanting, it distorts your perceptions. You don't see what's real, you see what you want to see. You can't see what is hard for you to see. And when all those hindrances are disappeared, then you get clarity, you get insight, you can see why these things are happening. And for her, that's not just saved her life, but also managed to teach other people. She's not a Buddhist, she calls herself a Christian, but nevertheless what she was experiencing is valid, and it shows that why we cause illnesses inside of us which we don't need to. So things like that, those out-of-the-body experiences, they can, first of all, teach us just know how that we don't have to be afraid of death. Dying, yes, that hurts, but death itself is very pleasant for most people. And number 2, it can teach us other insights, understanding about some of the causes for the problems in life, what we really need to do, what's really important in life. And you know that, I can't get past this one. I always remember my teacher Ajahn, that he used to do the glass thing. He'd hold up a glass and ask, is this glass cracked? The cracked glass simile. Can you see the crack in this glass? Those with good eyes. There's a crack there, because one day someone will drop this, it will break, and when it does break, you won't be able to use it anymore. It's the crack of impermanence, of fragility. Now that has a meaning behind it, because each one of you are fragile. Each one of you are cracked. I don't mean stupid. I mean cracked. You're not always going to be here. One day you're going to get injured, you're going to die. I can guarantee that. And if this was uncrackable, if this was some plastic which would last forever, and you could blow a bomb on top of it and it would still be there afterwards, it's so tough. If this was unbreakable, that would have a different type of consequence. If it was unbreakable, you would not need to care for it. If it's breakable, that's why you have to care. Your own body, your relationships you have with your loved ones, the ones you care about, even the things you use, your house, your car, I don't know what you have, but they're very valuable to you. Our democracy here in sort of Australia, there's so many things which are so valuable, because they're cracked, they can be easily lost. That's why we care. Especially for your own body. You know that one day it's going to go, so please care for it as much as you can. So it gives you the reason, what you get out of dying and things vanishing and disappearing and breaking. It's a lesson in how important it is to care for one another. But not only that those two experiences of learning just why it is important to understand what happens when you die. Now, sometimes people say, oh yeah, that's just myth. People make these stories up. They're not real. They're just imagining these cases. But the evidence keeps on accumulating. Year after year, more and more people do research on things like out-of-the-body experiences. And they find that they are true. That, you can check up on them. What people said and where they said it from. One of the interesting cases was of this person having an operation in a operating theatre in London, in UK somewhere. I think it was in Bristol. I could be wrong there. But anyway, they floated up above their body, and afterwards they said that when they came back and they recovered, they said that in the operating theatre, it was an old operating theatre, there was a tennis shoe on the windowsill. It was a weird thing to say. And they said, of course there's no tennis shoe on the windowsill, on the inside. This place is cleaned every day. It's an operating theatre, it has to be sterile. What's a tennis shoe doing up there? But she said it was certainly up there. They couldn't see it from the floor, so someone actually got a ladder. And when they actually went up on the windowsill, what do you think they found there? A tennis shoe. It was a famous example of someone seeing something which should not have been seen. It shouldn't even been there, but it was there. And I'm always fascinated by the fact that sometimes when it's pretty convincing evidence, people still deny it. Say, no, it's just you're making this up, Ajahn Brahm. No, I'd have to see it for myself. No, it cannot be true. And that is something which, as a trained scientist, theoretical physics at Cambridge University, so pretty heavy training, being a scientist, if the evidence is there, if you can't find a reason to deny that evidence, that somebody was lying or they weren't really seeing clearly, if the evidence is there, you have to accept it. And sometimes you should never allow your fear of seeing something new and your stubbornness not allowing different ways of understanding life. You have to put those aside and have the courage. So what you're seeing, what many other people see, the evidence, as they say, that has to be paramount. Never allow your learning or your religion or your philosophy to stand in the way of truth. Truth is there, and a lot of time we've been trained, conditioned by religion, politics, by culture, to not be able to see it, to deny it. And that's one of the great things about out-of-the-body experiences. They're telling us something important about our mind. It cannot be something to do with the body, because the body at the time is not working. That's one of the reasons I was always interested in this. And there was the first really great evidence of out-of-the-body experiences was done by this professor, professor in the Netherlands. And this professor, at the end of his career, he had all of these anecdotal messages from doctors and stuff who said that some of their patients had floated out of their body during the operations, had near-death experiences. And he wanted to find out whether this was true or not. So he designed the experiment. Every patient who came into his hospitals, he was a consultant about 4 or 5 hospitals in the Netherlands, everyone who came in with cardiac arrest, those who survived, he would give a questionnaire afterwards to see how many of them had NDEs, out-of-the-body experiences. And he found, I think, 17% or something over about 3 years. All religions, races, genders, and it wasn't specific to any of these, to any race or religion or age. About 70% had out-of-the-body experiences. Usual one about floating out of their body, being able to see and hear the conversations which were being talked about, and then floating off usually towards that light. And of course, as a meditator, I don't doubt that at all, because that's what happens even in deep meditation. Similar experiences, but you're alive all the time. But anyway, this is out-of-the-body experiences. What it does give hard evidence about the nature of the human mind. Many people keep on saying the mind doesn't exist. It's just, the brain, or the body, and the 5 senses and the brain, but there's no such thing as a mind. It's just a byproduct of the body. And this is actually hard evidence which counters that, and it has consequences. Once you know there's more to this life than just a body and stuff, there is a thing called a mind, then actually you can understand why you have what maybe doctors call magical cures, when people have cancers and then they don't, when people are supposed to die and they don't. Why? And the reason is because it's not just the body which is important, it's the mind is also important. The mind can do amazing things. Okay, just a few examples. One thing I remember seeing as a student, this was at Cambridge, we had not just the science experiments, but we were encouraged in those universities, our workload of lectures and tutorials and stuff we had to do was not that heavy that we didn't have the opportunity to go and experiment and explore. And so one of the societies I explored was the Psychic Research Society. I always wanted to know, what is a ghost? Are they just myths which people exploit to make money on movies? Or is actually something really there? And being a scientist, you weren't afraid. You were courageous enough to push the boundaries and find out. But the particular experiment I'm going to talk about now is under hypnosis. And people know these days hypnosis works. And one of these guys is one of the hypnotists around just over there. Good old, don't mind me calling you Dennis. He does hypnotic therapy, gets into past lives and all sorts of interesting stuff. But anyway, this was when we hypnotized a student. This was in public and in an auditorium, and had a stick with a 4-inch nail on the end. And they hypnotized the student into believing that nail was red hot. It wasn't, it was just room temperature. And they touched that nail on the student's skin. He screamed in pain. I could expect that, because he thought it was red hot. But what I'd never expected was to see a blister appear on his skin. A wound. How on earth did that happen? But afterwards, seeing that with my own eyes and contemplating it, I thought, if the mind could create a blister when there's no other reason, no other cause of it, why can't the mind shrink a tumour? One of the reasons why it doesn't is because people think it can't. They don't even believe that. They stop the mind from being able to do this. Sometimes it won't work. If you don't have the confidence it's possible, of course the mind has got no power. If you have confidence it can, and that little experiment which I saw gave me that confidence, yeah, these things can be done. Your mind is very powerful. It exists, it's powerful. And then, of course, a lot of Buddhism comes out of that, and Hinduism as well, and many other religions or philosophies of faiths which understand that when you die, just the body dies, but things like the mind will continue on to your next life. They call it stream of consciousness. So, just the fact of just, okay, I'm going to enjoy myself as much as I can, get as much as I can out of this life. When I die, we're all the same. We all die, disappear, and don't come back again. Of course you do. The mind continues on to another life. That's why some people can remember those previous lives. And it's not only remember those previous lives, but also know why this life leads to the next one. What characteristics carry on from life to life. What that means is that what you do in this life, this is just like 1 year at university, not the whole thing. If you have an unpleasant life, bad accidents or something, and you die young or something, that's not the whole story. You can come back again. They're not here this evening, but I saw them this afternoon. This Thai couple, when they had their first child, this was a very healthy lady, but her first child was stillborn. Apparently that it turned in the womb just about 3 or 4 days before birth, cut off the blood supply, and was stillborn. A bit of a tragedy, but they took it really well. I did the funeral service for them in Barano Day up the road in Wanneroo Road, and that was many years ago, maybe 25 years ago or something. No more than that, maybe 30 years ago. But anyway, at the funeral, there was only a little kid. They dressed him up, they called him Charlie, had a photograph. I was in the photograph, like family photograph with their family monk, little Charlie, and then was cremated. But what they never told me at the time, I should have guessed, because it's a tradition in Thailand, for some places, they took an ordinary biro pen and drew a line on Charlie's heel in blue ink. Never told anyone that. You know why they did that? Because the idea was, if Charlie came back, didn't quite make it the first time, but was reincarnated back into their family, that baby would have a line, a birthmark. She was a healthy woman. Of course, I tell this story because you can go forward quickly. Of course, she did get pregnant. She gave a very healthy birth to her next child, and that child has a birthmark, exactly where they put it, on the heel. Now you could say that's coincidence, but I can't accept that. That's just too much coincidence. There is some sort of truth there. But interestingly, I say this for a bit of fun, that Charlie, of course, the name of a boy, often if you don't quite make it the first time and you get some monks like me really chanting, come on, you can make it, the next time it became a girl. We always say, if you miss the flight, because the flight is overbooked or something, when you're going off to overseas for a holiday, what does the air company do for you? They usually give you an upgrade. So I said, Charlie got an upgrade and got reborn as a girl. But of course, I saw that with my own eyes, and I just did see the first years of life of Charlie, now called Anne. And it was a tomboy. We didn't have this hall at the time, just had the community hall, and would always love playing with the boys. Would never play with the girls. It was a tough girl. That's what we call a tomboy. Those are stories which you can understand and actually are true. And that means if you know somebody tries to give birth and it doesn't quite work, don't worry. They can come back again, have another go. If you don't get into university the first time, you can always do the degree again. If you don't pass your driving test first time, you do it again a second time. And life is like that. So if you don't get born the first time, have another go and see what happens. This is not just trying to be kind to parents who've lost kids, but it's actually real. It actually happens. And it's the same, if somebody dies like young or something and it's just a tragedy, don't worry, they'll come back again. Or if somebody is like a politician and they blow up other people's countries, or they go and cause havoc to the environment. I think many of these politicians who've done some very bad jobs for other people will get reborn in their next life in places like Iraq or or places. Imagine if all the people with power knew that they would have to put up with the consequences of their actions throughout the next 100 years. Wouldn't they be a bit more caring for things like the environment? And not so like racist, not so misogynistic. If you knew that you're going to have to be a woman in your next life, or you have to be a lesbian in your next life, or a gay in your next life, wouldn't people be a bit kinder to others when you know that that's a possibility for you too? So this is one of the reasons why understanding the nature of out-of-the-body experiences, and if you have the good fortune to have experienced one, or other people who have, is really powerful experiences which change the way you look at life and make you a much better, more caring person. And that's the whole reason of giving a talk like this today, to try and make a better world and give you a reason for it, not because you're just inspired, because this is real. That we have to look after Australia next year and the year before, because most of you will be here for quite a few more years. That's why we have to also look after the whole planet for so many years, because you might be born there next time. Okay, enough. So thank you for listening. Now we have the comments, questions and complaints. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, now questions, comments. And sorry for the delay at the beginning. Oops. Oh, you got a question? Anyone from the floor? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's good.
Great talk, Ajahn. Can everyone hear me? Is that loud enough?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Two things. First of all, did you know today is International Joke Day?
No.
It is. It is, seriously.
Is that the joke?
No. The joke. I have got a joke for you. All right. What do you call a woman who's burnt her credit cards?
I had plastic surgery.
Bernadette.
Burnt out. Okay.
And I sat next to a guy on the plane on the way back from Singapore the other week.
Okay.
And he was a ex-policeman from the WA major crash squad.
Yeah.
And he was telling me that on a number of occasions, and in particular an accident he went to in Esperance. He was driving down to this accident, and a woman, like a ghost woman, was sitting on the back seat, and she said her name. And when he got there, the body was completely obliterated. But when he did the paperwork, it was the same name that was said in the car.
Yeah.
So he's big time into ghosts, and he started some Perth poltergeist YouTube channel thing, and he does these investigations around town. So if anyone's interested, he's out there on YouTube.
Oh, great,
That's
excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, I told him to go see the monks at Serpentine, so you might get a call.
No, it's again one of my best friends, and we had him come up here for that conference we did some years ago. And that was Professor Bernard Carr, emeritus now, he's the same age as me, or 1 year older, emeritus professor of theoretical physics in London University, I think Queen Mary College, London University. So he was a very obviously great professor. He was also one of the inner circle of Stephen Hawking's. So much so that he was featured in the movie they made about Stephen Hawking's, and was invited to on the red carpet in Leicester Square. So he was obviously a very, very successful and bright theoretical physicist. But he was also the president of the London Society of Psychic Research. That's where we became friends. We weren't just doing the stuff on physics, we were also hunting ghosts together. And also he was a member of the Buddhist Society. So he was one of these people who, very high intellect, a physicist, and of the highest standards, but he was also being honest enough. Why can't we find out what's really happening in the world? And we have things like ghosts, people who can remember their past lives. Why can't we use that as evidence to find out what is actually happening with human beings? One of the things I said is before, that these days many people are what we call materialists. And materialism in science is thinking that it's just stuff, just bodies and earth and sort of space, but not the mind, not the heart, not the emotional world. That is just a byproduct of something. How many theories do you have about anger? Like a psychologist, psychiatrist trying to find out, but we're much more interested in how we can make more money, or how we can drive cars faster, or planes faster, or trains faster. That's what I was looking for. Fast speed trains. Not about the kindness of people you meet when you get to your destination. And that materialist part of society is one part of our world which has made us not care so much about people. Even doctors. In the last couple of weeks there were some doctors, a couple from Adelaide, they were young doctors, they were on holiday here, they wanted to come and see what we were doing here. And they said that little thing which I added in one of the books, it's more important to care than to cure. People are more important than things. The heart is more important and more inspiring than stuff. It's not how big your house is or how expensive it is, it's how happy it is when you get inside. And you can feel that. So, emphasizing the emotional part of our world, it goes against the material side. We're not such a materialist society when we include a heart, a mind, kindness and stuff. So there's a passion for me to make sure that the evidence is there. Why does so many people just ignore it? Honestly, you never have to be afraid of ghosts. Even ghosts are usually really kind. They can help you out so many times. I'm talking through lots of experience and understanding and knowledge. And also, the mind has got more power than you could imagine. It's one of the reasons why you can make use of it, to heal all sorts of sicknesses, which you thought was impossible, but it can work. I've seen it. Experienced some of it too, personally. And also, it's why can't we make use of that? So that's one of the reasons why I give talks like this. Or maybe just shouting at people who just don't want to listen, but I think some of you may understand just how powerful this mind is and how it can do weird stuff and how some of that weird stuff is inexplicable, but it's very positive. It's helping, it's healing. Kindness is more important than your willpower. Be kind to others. Don't try and overtake them. And be kind to yourself. You don't have to please others. If you're kind and peaceful, you automatically please others. Okay, I'm going on too long again, sorry. But there are some questions over here. Thank you for your questions. Did you really make that up, International Joke Day? Okay. How come I didn't know? Okay. Yeah. Okay, oops. Ajahn, are our actions of the present moment determined by past habits, or do we have a will and a choice to do whatever we wish? Does non-self mean that actions are predetermined? You can always say no. That was the great research of Professor Libet. So sometimes some of the choices you make, why you do this or why you go there, are sometimes pretty much conditioned on you, not predetermined, but you can always say no. You don't, as he put it in a very wonderful way, you don't have free will, but you do have free won't. You don't have to follow that habit. If death is very pleasant, like experience in nimitta, what did the Buddha mean by the first noble truth? Death is suffering. Yes, he did say that. It's like dying is suffering. If you don't know what's going on, for many people dying is suffering, because it gives rise to more birth, and you go through the same thing all over again. There was this one story, supposed to be true, confirmed as best you possibly can, a baby being born in a maternity ward, no, it was a boy, sorry, born in a maternity ward in the US. And when the baby came out of the womb, still attached to the umbilical cord, spoke, uttered words. And the words which it said were just classic. It said, and everyone there heard it, "Oh no, not again." Imagine that was you. Here we go again. More primary school, more homework, more everything work. Oh my goodness, what have I got into? So refer to the process leading to death, yes. Though he mentioned illness separately, there's illness and there's like the deathly illness, that's when things get very painful because your body is just struggling, to live. And a lot of times the life and death are so important that everything else is given up. The quality of your death doesn't really matter. If you think, life is more important than anything, which is one of the reasons why in hospitals you see the dying process. They'll do anything to try and keep you alive for a few more days, and some of that is totally meaningless. It's one of the reasons why when we did a little experiment, this was in Hong Kong years ago, that I got people to double up, you're A, B, A, B, A, B, and all an A and B go together, and A is okay. This was in a hospital, nurses mostly, a few doctors. When I ring the bell, then one of you, number A, will pretend to have a heart attack. Because I've seen it many times. They work in the hospitals every day. Pretend you have a heart attack, and then be the first responder. And so I rang the bell, and then they did all the holding their hearts and falling to the ground stuff. And then the first responder said, "Keep your eyes open, stay with me, help is coming." And then we asked afterwards to the A's, "What did it feel like?" And said it was just really intrusive. It was caused more stress having the first responder trying so hard to keep you alive. Okay, let's turn it around. Now when I ring the bell, B's pretend to have a heart attack, which they did, and A's, how are you going to respond? And when they respond, say, "It's okay, relax, help is coming if you want it. It's okay to die, it's not a big deal, we all die one day anyway." It was so much more calmer, and it was so much more pleasant when people don't just rush around panicking when you're about to die. I'm sure actually that probably kills more patients than the disease itself. Having all these people rushing around, putting tubes inside here and tubes inside there, and defibrillators and all sorts of other stuff, and injections and stuff. Crikey, can't you just die peacefully? It's your body. Why is other people getting so involved in it? They're trying to keep you alive, but are you? Or are you hastening the death for that poor person? That's a question to ask anyone who's been in a hospital seeing that. But anyway, those doctors and nurses, they got the message. So they said next time that somebody has a serious incident, they're going to be much calmer and not just stress their patients out to the point they may even kill them. Anyway, what is the time period between somebody passing away and being reborn? That's a tough question because it's almost anything. And even what happens, okay, this is pretty good evidence about this, and it's not common, but it does happen, that sometimes somebody passes away and they get reborn in a body which is already kind of viable, already been born. That happened to a great teacher, it seems, I won't say the name because they're still alive, was born in the body of a drowned boy. The boy had died in a village lake, and he's been under the water for hours. When they found him, he came alive again. And the person who he eventually became was quite a famous meditation teacher, and he said that was his first memory, this brilliant light, and he gaining consciousness in the body of this young boy. That stream of consciousness had gone into a living being. The body was still viable, but the old spirit had gone out. So sometimes it's negative period. Dear Ajahn Brahm, how to distinguish an out-of-body experience in meditation from our imagination? One thing is, if it's real meditation, then the 5 hindrances are gone. And one of those hindrances, number 5, is doubt. What happens after deep meditation? Your mind is so clear. There is no wanting, there's no ill will, there's nothing to distort the mind. You've got real courage, no fear. So whatever you see, it has this quality of being more true than anything you've seen before. There is no doubt there at all. And so that's what happens when that 5th hindrance of doubt is overcome, and you have a good enough meditation to see sort of a past life or out-of-body experience. A lot of times that is really clear. No doubt at all. It's hard to explain these things. There's not enough words for it because, surely you can be deceiving yourself. There's a quality to what happens after those 5 hindrances are disappeared that it's true. That certainty there, my goodness, it is true. That's why, like one of these ladies, she's not here this evening, that I was on some of these retreats, some of the meditation they do is really deep. So she had some deep meditation, so I asked her afterwards, why don't you try and find out your earliest memory? And she came to me afterwards and said, yeah, it worked. She had a very deep meditation as she was coming out, what's my earliest memory? And she saw herself being suckled, breastfed, by her mum, but then she looked up at her mum, and it wasn't her mother, it was somebody else. She could recognize that, even though this was many years afterwards. I remember her coming up to me in the retreat, really concerned. Is there something my mother hasn't told me? Was I adopted? What's going on? Because I'm certain that person I saw is not my mother. And so I said, well, it's a couple of days left of the retreat, just calm down, and when the retreat's over, go and see your mum. And just have nice, calm conversation, and then ask her, are you really my mum? Was I adopted? And that's what she did. She asked her mother, was I adopted? What are you talking about? I'm your mother. Why are you asking that? And so she told her mother what had happened. And her mother said, can you describe that lady to me who was breastfeeding you? And of course, in meditation you have a very clear memory of what happened. And she gave the description of that person who was breastfeeding her when she was a little baby. And the mother was quite stunned. That was your wet nurse. We came from an expensive family. Oh, not expensive, a very rich family. So we decided to get you a wet nurse. To feed you rather than me. And you described her perfectly. And that really inspired the mum as well as the lady, about these things are actually true. So that was quite a shocking thing to see. Maybe your mother's not your real mother, but it was. So, interesting stuff. So anyway, any more questions before we finish off? Oh, Eddie, of course, yeah.
Ajahn Brahm, very interesting, unusual talk. I just get your opinion, okay?
Okay.
During your talk, I was thinking of the 5 aggregates, the 5 skandhas.
Yeah.
Mind over matter. So
Yeah.
the mind is the consciousness, then we have the perception, mental formations, and then the matter, we have our body, we have the water, air, fire, and earth, So when we die, the body, these elements dissolves in it, the fire out, and our consciousness floats in it. Am I right to say that?
It's kind of, but your body, it just flows into other elements.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Nothing disappears. And your perception, your Vedana, I prefer experience and feelings. I prefer for Sankhara, will. And for your consciousness is 6 of them. And the 5 of them shut down. That's sight, smell, so sight, hearing, smell, taste and touch. And the 6th consciousness, the mind consciousness, that keeps flowing on. Doesn't disappear, but flows on like a stream of consciousness. And that's a nice metaphor because a stream, I said this last Sunday, the Swan River, every time I cross it, it looks exactly the same. But every particle of water is different from week to week. Every Friday when I cross that bridge, I look at that river. Actually, I didn't cross it today, we came by Tonkin Highway. But it always looks the same, but it's different. That's the same as your mind consciousness. It may look the same, but it's different.
Also, Ajahn Brahm, in Buddhism,
Yeah.
we believe that life never dies, There's a song, in fact, life never dies,
Yeah.
Yeah, and it goes from one state to another, isn't it? Within the 31 planes of existence. Am I right to say that?
Yeah, you can say that, but it does eventually cease. That's Nibbana.
Oh, yeah, eventually, I think, yeah.
You can say that, but it's nice to have Buddhist songs instead of like
BGF.
That's Victor Wee. Life is a bowl of cherries or whatever. No, it's amazing just the whole cosmology of Buddhism. And of course, even as theoretical physicists, we have multiple universes. Is that possible? Certainly sequential universes after the Big Bang, before the Big Bang. There were other universes before that. Post the end of everything, another universe appears after that. You ask theoretical physicists, and they say, yes, of course, why not? That's why I remember, what's his name? Stephen Hawkins saying, he now states a universe with no boundaries, not in time, not in space. The whole idea of a universe, this is why I liked being trained in theoretical physics, because I realized my problem was not sort of belief, but my beliefs, the way I viewed the world, was actually restricting the way I could understand the truth of the world. Now, quantum physics was crazy. How can you have like Schrodinger's cat in a box, it's 50% alive, 50% dead, and no one knows exactly what it is until you open the lid? What does the cat think about that? It was illogical at first, because my understanding was limited. After a while you realize that was true. Quantum probabilities. And some of that stuff, this universe has a limited size. I don't know the exact number now, but maybe, I don't know, so many billion light years, squared times pi, a cube, sorry. But anyway, it's got a limited space, but it's got no boundaries. You can't go to a place and there you find a big sign, end of the universe, can't go further. There is no edge to this universe, but it's limited. And that bends your mind, but it's true. If you want to know how to understand it, I remember just the lecturer just simply explained. He just came in with a ball, I think a basketball, and he said, look at this basketball, it's got limited area, surface area, just like planet Earth, but it's got no edge to it. Just like this universe, it keeps going on and on and on and on, but limited volume. And this is just one universe. Why are we just caught up with just one universe? Why can't there be more? Anyway, this is
just one more thing.
only one.
Just one. Sorry. It's okay.
Okay.
Just now you mentioned, Ajahn Brahm, our mind, whether our mind can help to overcome the tumors, tumors.
Yeah.
Our tumors. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's this Mahayasi Sayadaw,
Yeah.
In his book, they call, I remember, Dhamma therapy. He conducted experiments, okay? Yeah. And then, if the person can meditate, for 28 days or what, 20 hours a day, and that helped with, how they say that, it can help the tumor to burst,
Well, I don't know.
I read that, yeah.
Yeah. But certainly, I've known many people whose tumors have vanished from meditating or just changing their attitudes. So anyway, it works. Okay, I think I can't keep on talking till the last person walks out the door, so I think I should finish now. Thank you, Eddie. So thank you again for all those questions, and hopefully it was a useful talk. All done on the spur of the moment. So anyway, we're now about 3 times Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Suakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Very good. And after the out-of-body experiences, you can have out-of-the-hall experience.
Thank you.